Anyway, here's a lot of birds doing the beautiful birdie thing. And yeah, I've just been chatting with one of the neighbours, and he's talking about how the world's going to shit. The world's going to end and something really bad is going to happen. And my response to him is, but yeah, well, that's true. But actually, it is just clearing stuff out. All that badness has been building up for a long time and has got to come to the surface and come out, including the AIs, and the world wars and the inflations and every other thing. It's all instinctual. And all my studies are saying people don't know what they're doing. People are essentially possessed by spirits, even if you call those spirits souls. The idea that we have soul is that our intelligence is coming from some higher level, and our instincts are coming from some lower level. And if there's a war between good and bad, or up and down, or in and out, it's kind of a war on that level, between the soul and the instinct, between spirits, between the truth and what is not truth. And we're in a dualistic version of reality here, where it's truth and not truth. So at this point, you've got everybody arguing about which version of the truth is the most accurate truth, which one is the real truth, and if your truth isn't the same as my truth, then you must be a liar, or a fool, or a Satanist, or a conspiratorist, or a going along with an evil plan kind of person, kind of thing. Yeah, I've got a dog and I've got cats, and they're not worrying their heads about any of this stuff. Not taking signs, kind of thing. And yet it is the instinct of my dog that he will bark at the postman because the postman keeps coming within our territory. And so my dog's instinct is to protect the family from the invader, type thing. So these things keep happening. Here's our cat. This cat in particular keeps coming out to the field to join us when we take the dog for a walk. An unusual thing for a cat to do. Is it love, or is it because he knows I'm the main person who feeds him? This cat also attacks his sisters more than any of the other cats. Wonder why. So anyway, yeah, yesterday me and the kids, we were in Sainsbury's doing the shopping, and I noticed for the first time, really, I hadn't really noticed before, but the staff in Sainsbury's are all wearing those cameras around their necks on a piece of string, which is presumably to save them from angry customers. And they're wearing an earpiece, kind of headphone thing, and a microphone thing. So we're being audio video recorded in case we get really angry at the staff. But anyway, I like being jolly in the supermarket and chatting to customers and staff, sometimes with weird little cosmic questions or observations. So I asked this guy, in his late 50s, who's working there, how long has he been wearing these cameras? And he said like 3 years. And then at the cashier lady, she said 1 year. No, she said a few months. And then she asked another cashier lady, and she said a year. So in the same store, 3 members of staff, one thought it's 3 years, one thought it's maybe 3 months, and one thought it's a year that they've been wearing these cameras and stuff. So what does that say about people's perception of time? I mean, these guys are wearing these things every day that they're at work. Whew. So anyway, maybe he's come from down south in the cities and has moved up here, so maybe he's been wearing it for 3 years, but still. And so another observation is that our ability to recall time accurately is all over the place. and our ability to, know how many years it's been since such and such. So this is our memory and this is our recall. And again, just a big observation, we don't know how our minds actually work. Maybe some specialist scientists, neural brain surgeons and all that thing, think they know how parts of the brain work and all that thing. But it's like we can use ChatGTP without really understanding anything about computer science. Or we can use our mobile phones without really understanding anything about computer science. Kind of thing. Well, we can use our brains without really understanding anything about computer science. The observation I'm making here is merely that there are perhaps a higher order of beings who are using us in the way that we use mobile phones. That our physical body with our little personalities may well just be a machine-like thing which a higher order of intelligent being is using in the same way as, like, right now in my hand, and it's pointing in that direction, and now it's pointing in this direction. It's looking outwards, forwards, and now it's looking backwards. But yeah, so like the neighbour who's talking about, oh, the whole world, something bad is going to happen, which he's been saying for the 2 or 3 years that I've been chatting to him. So he's caught in the right-wing conspiracy stuff on his WhatsApp chats and all that kind of stuff. But he's also a man who remembers his dreams quite often and often has prophetic dreams, not necessarily of stuff that's going on a worldwide level, but of like people who die before they die, motorcycle crashes in his own family and stuff like that kind of thing. So he's got a prescience, or he's had experiences that what you see in the physical world is not necessarily all that is that's going on. And so I'm talking about some higher order of beings there, and they could be extraterrestrials, I could be talking about souls, I could be talking about ghosts, I could be talking about fairies, interdimensional beings, ghouls, what people call entities, what people call dark entities. So I'm looking at all these people arguing on their Facebooks or in reality over who's right and who's wrong, who's a shill, who's left, who's right, who's a follower, who's a leader, who's a goat, who's a sheep, who's a human, who's an android. Yeah. There's the birds doing it again. So it seems kind of crazy that the computer sciencey type people are like, whoa, we're living in a simulation. And obvious this is biological existence, as in this is organic matter, this is blood pumping through veins. We're not so fooled as to be thinking that we're living in a simulation and as something that's not really real. And yet there's something to this, which we find anathema, which we find really difficult to consider. Because the birds are programmed. My dog, I used to love letting him run wild and stuff like that, but then he was chasing deer, which is kind of okay, it gives him a good run, but actually then someone pointed out sometimes he's chasing the deer out onto the roads, which again is kind of natural sometimes, but it could be a danger for humans who are driving these really fast cars and trucks on roads, so he could cause damage to humans. So don't let him do that so much some more. So we just start throwing balls, and he runs and catches the ball, and now his whole world revolves. Even in the house, he's just picking up the ball and saying, hey, will you take me out and throw the ball? And it's all going on in brain chemistry. It's all going on in something moves and he's got to chase it, kind of thing. And I'm just saying, this is a bit like this with humans. We don't really understand why it is that we're fixated on the things that we're fixated on. And difficulty I have at the minute is like trying to express that things are all actually going to work out well in the end, that there is an end, that the end isn't like there's nothing after the end type of thing, but that there's a transformation going on, and it does have a point where it reaches a conclusion type of thing. framing things in the point of view of what's going on these days is everyone's fixated actually on their trauma. Whether they recognise it or not, I mean, they may have it projected onto the outside world that the outside world is sick instead of realising they have a sickness in themselves. They might have it projecting onto the outside world that the outside world is wrong, rather than recognising there's something wrong in themselves. But yeah, to explain the idea that all of our trauma is up because there is a benevolence in the creation of this lifetime, which is seeking to heal whatever it is that is unhealed, seeking to resolve whatever it is that became complicated in the whole story. And for example, there are so many people who believe in major religions, and those major religions are going off the Jewish Old Testament, and the Jewish Old Testament has got that Genesis story in it, and that Genesis story is one of the only explanations that we have for how did the creation come into being, kind of thing. And it is merely a story. And in that story you have these characters. There's a male and a female and a snake and a God character. And none of it's really explained. And yet, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, kind of stuff. Which, interpreted in a certain way, does say that this is all just a language program. That we are all speaking a language program, and I just can't help but see the analogy there with the computer programs. And now we have androids, as in robots running software, and the ChatGPT type generative creativity is going to be running all of these robots. And again, if we're created in the image of God, what we're creating in our robots is in the image of us. It's the other way of looking at that the God that we have created is in our image. I just find it all interesting. There you go. Enough again for now. So here's another anecdotal story, but when I was young and all my life, I would do any jobs that my parents ever asked me. But in the last 10 years or whatever, sometimes my dad would ask me to spray weed killer. And I'd be like, nope, I won't do it. Anyway, another anecdotal story. Recently, a friend of mine is a carer, cares for an old lady. And old lady asked his friend, will you spray some weed killer stuff in the garden to keep down the weeds and stuff? Craziness. Anyway, the friend said, no, I'm not up for that. So the old lady got someone else to do it. Second part of anecdotal story of old lady is she started drinking herbal tea from her garden, type of thing. Turns out, whoever had sprayed the weed killer had gotten some weed killer on the herbs in the garden that the tea is made from. So the old lady was actually poisoning herself. Little did she know it. That's like some sort of an instant karma thing on some level. Just a bit weird, eh? And analogy of the planet Earth, analogy of old ideas dying out, old ideas essentially killing themselves, kind of thing. So here we are living on a planet Earth, in a solar system, in a galaxy, in a universe, in a multiverse, in whatever's bigger than a universe, bigger than a multiverse. And what else? Here we are living in what's called the third dimension, which is apparently, the depth, the space, linked cubes. Cubes are a good way of saying it. 3D is like the shape of a cube kind of thing. And then 4D is said to be like a hypercube. So the fourth dimension is said to be time. So from 3D, it's like that point in the film where you're watching right now, where the playhead is. But 4D is like, oh, this film is actually 2.5 hours long. And even though you're at a certain point in the film, no matter what point you're at in the film is as long as it is. It's got a beginning and an end kind of thing. And then there's the idea that this film can be watched in an infinite amount of ways. There are infinite amount of choices that the characters are making, and depending on what choices are being made in the film is what version of the film is being experienced, and that's called multiple narratives, multiple characters, deep immersive interactive multimedia thingamajig, yeah? Or these days that's called a virtual reality game, and you can be inside in the virtual reality game playing an avatar character, and you get to choose within a relatively limited amount of choices which thing you're going to do. And it's memory, it's what's called memory in the computer science, as to how much choices you can have, how much you can remember of what things you've already done, based on the things you've already done, what things you might do differently this time, or the same this time because it worked last time. And that's called to adapt. And adapting is the same word actually as artificial, artifice, to remember what you've done and try it a slightly different way to see if you might slightly improve upon the technique kind of thing. So, based on those definitions, how can we not see that having a body is actually an immersive experience inside of time in a relatively limited set of opportunities with fear-based narratives in the drama and some sort of a goal at the end of it, but the goal is not so straightforward as just do this and you get the prize kind of thing. In the same analogy that you can playing a virtual reality game on the internet, interacting with other people who are in their bedrooms on their computers playing their games kind of thing, and you can get killed in the game and respawn from the beginning of the game, make a whole new character, or you can get killed in the game and respawn from somewhere near the point where you died kind of thing, with still your same characteristics. Is that not like the soul level evolution stuff that we call spirituality type of thing? Yeah. So you can have the analogy of old souls and new souls. You can have the idea that old souls are people who've been playing this particular earth game for a very, very, very long time, and not so old souls being beings or souls who've been born more recently, or come from whatever other part of the multiverse to this particular join in this game more recently. Because the idea that some souls are older than other souls is a little bit weird kind of thing. So if one is an old soul in this earth game, I would think that's the equivalent to being fairies and all that stuff. And from my point of view, I'm being told by other people, oh, I'm some sort of a really old soul. This is stuff that other people tell me that I have to try and get my head around. Because what does it mean? I mean, I don't know what it fucking means, but I'm trying to figure it out. So if one is an old soul in that sense, it means one has been playing this game for a very, very, very long time in this version of reality type of thing. If in that sense one is one of the original architects of the Earth version of the game, and all these people have come here, and particularly the people who've been playing this game the longest, this amnesia thing of not remembering having had played before, and this responsibility that things are getting pretty wacky at this stage, and an awful lot of people are not really enjoying the game type of thing. So the old souls who are up for the healing of the whole game to resolve whatever the purpose of this game was, or if this game got hacked, to fix the hack type of thing and bring the game back to its original purpose. But what I'm trying to get across to here, to cut to the quick, is the idea that everyone's got trauma, and trauma's got something to do with feelings and the memory, and mind is actually trying to control on the one hand, which could be damage limitation rather than merely like nasty controlling issues. But the thing being, from my point of view, that there are feelings which nobody wants to feel, And those feelings have caused a bottleneck, which have blocked the whole scenario. So people are all virtue signaling of pretending to just be their positive selves and denying their dark side, so to speak. People want to be light and deny the dark. And that denying of feelings that nobody wants to feel essentially pushes those feelings onto people in control mechanisms. So the mind is denying feelings and pushing it onto other people, which is what we call scapegoating. But the idea being here, what I'm trying to say is, the oldest souls would actually intentionally want to feel all the trauma in order to clear all that trauma, in order to heal things for the collective. And if you're a really old soul who's actually involved in having created this thing in the first place, then maybe that's why some people are actually willingly feeling stuff that nobody would want to feel and having experiences that nobody would really want to have in order to clear the backlog of denied feelings. And that's a reference to this Right Use of Will books. Right Use of Will, written by a woman called Sian the Rohan, which is really well worth finding. So a lot of the idea behind those books and the interest I have around channeling is these books are essentially channeled in the sense of the lady who wrote the books certainly feels as if and understands as if it is the being of light, loving light, God, spirit, who somehow contacted her and said, hey, I want you to transcribe these ideas that I'm giving to you into a book so that they can be down there in the carnal, material, physical world in order to be able to get movement happening among the feelings which everybody has been denying since the beginning of creation. And in that version of things, that loving light God is admitting in those books that he actually judged the feminine feelings, that there were some feelings that he did not like in a loving light universe of perfection. And having denied those feelings that he didn't like, he pushed them outside of himself so that they were not in his creation as far as he could see. In shorthand, that squarely puts a lot of the blame or responsibility for how creation is actually fucked up upon light, upon spirit. That spirit actually made mistakes, that God is not the perfected idea that we have about God, that God actually made errors and had stuff to learn. It's also an idea that God has a mother, that feeling is the mother of spirit, and feeling is feminine and spirit is masculine, and that kind of thing. So the idea coming across, and this is just part of the idea in the storytelling of these books, but the idea being that spirit realized that in denying some feelings, he actually caused all this bottleneck, which has caused all the disasters of all the inequalities of all the fucking... So essentially, Earth is the depository of, if things don't get healed on Earth, then the whole universe is going to die, and God light is going to die, and the whole recreation thing is going to happen yet again, type of thing. Yeah. Interesting, huh? So again, in those books, or in my own understanding of things, this relationship between spirit as father, but the father actually having a mother. The mother and the father, in coming together, create a child. But the mother gives birth to the child. It is the child who makes the father a father. Without a child, the masculine is merely masculine. It's just an extension. It's just an externalization of feeling into an outer world. So if you think of this in terms of the religious stuff, it is the Christ who makes God the Father. It is the Christ who verbalizes or expresses the potential to be the Father, type thing. And in this whole thing, we're talking about the masculine denying the feminine in order to overcome feeling inadequate and essentially useless, and essentially just an external extension of feeling. Thus, the hatred towards feeling kind of thing that ends up in a patriarchy. Now, these are complicated things. I'm not saying any of this is black and white without a rainbow and that the rainbow's got more than 7 colours in the spectrum, kind of thing, if you can do that. There's ways of trying to express that we are inside of creation, and we don't understand how creation got created, and we have religions telling very basic stories that don't really explain anything about how we get to be here. That there's a mental plane trying to explain stuff that's actually totally judgmental and denying loads of the whole truth in order to focus on partial truths, of which people fight over which part of the truth is the bigger part, kind of thing. So if we go back to what I'm saying there in the analogy of the world being like a film and it being an immersive film that's like a game film, part of what I'm trying to get my head around at the minute is, time as a construct, like a bubble that you can be inside. Therefore, there's an outside of time. Inside of time, things seem to be a duality. The duality of polarization is actually what makes learning possible. Learning is something to do with self-reflection, self-identity. Self-identity is something to do with what's an entity. Entities is something to do with individuation. Individuation is something to do with we have individual souls. Duality has a contrast of non-duality, which would be outside the bubble of time, which would be where we are all joined together as souls. And yet there is an individuation. In that sense, I once came up with a little story in my mind, or a story I channeled from the madness that goes on in psychosis, of a mirror world, that a frame which could hold a mirror, which I held up to other souls in the non-differentiated outside of time and said, hey, have a look in this mirror. And people saw an image of themselves and became narcissistically attracted to look deeper into their mirror, which is the portal through which souls came down to earth as individualized souls in their avatar bodies, which is what is your entrance into the game as an avatar. And in that whole idea from a few years ago, early on in COVID it was the idea that time is coming to an end, that the ones who've invented this game are saying there's an awful lot of suffering going on and actually it's time to end the game. It's time to heal all the suffering. The point of the game was to heal a whole load of stuff which on the undifferentiated soul level was unresolved, which is talked about in that Right Use of Will books, in the story of creation that's going on there, that's so deep. Story of creation of our souls, not just the material realm. And in that whole idea of an immersive game is the idea that we are nearing the end of the game. There's only like less than 3 years left before the whole fucking thing is resolved. Just dig that? And putting a time frame on it like that is on the one hand the intuitive, but more recently it's backed up by understanding, if you look ahead in the next 3 years of astrology, the outer planets are making angles to each other, which is really unusual, the kind of angles they're making, and the intensity of it, and the amount of these angles, that they're all involved in this being at the end of the sign to the start of the next sign. So they're all within 30 or 60 or 90 degrees or 180 degrees of each other, kind of thing. But the angles are really exact, and lots of them are making these angles with each other. In fact, all of them are. And that's just so unusual. And that continues to intensify over these next 3 years. And after 2027, there are no more of those angles happening for 15 to 30 years. Like the odd one, 15 and then 30 years time kind of thing, roughly speaking. Whereas at the moment, these angles are happening, quite a few dozen of them are going to be happening over this next 3 years, kind of thing. And so I'm grasping or recognizing or holding that kind of concept in mind, playing it parallel with what in my irrational mind channeled in a story form, if you want to call it that, back in 2020, in July, August, September, together with all my old soul knowledge of the ancienty stuff, such as that, the Atlanteans don't much like to talk about that they're the ones that destroyed Lemuria, kind of thing. The Atlanteans don't like to talk very much that the Atlantis civilization fell because it was so separate from its feelings. that essentially the Atlantean civilization was kind of pointless because it was merely technological and mental. It didn't really have the magic of feeling that it tried to take from the Lemurians, which is to say the native indigenous earth mother people. So that's a bit like the Atlanteans are the masculine spirit, and they attacked the mother's emotions on earth, which is what caused a rift. Then came the rift, and time became swift. The line was then dawn, up over the dawn, for high magic was needed. Quick time superseded, a solution was needed, so we interceded. The return of the bird tribes of old and of song, we come now to remind you, to sing you this song. You had forgotten who you are now. You had forgotten how to live. You had forgotten what the point is. You had forgotten how to give this life you are living now. This life we are all forgiven now. Let go. Let's dance and let's grow. For we angels are landing. We knew our own seeds in our homes. We are welcome in this time of great need. So bless us, Create-trix, by the sun, moon, and trees. This tragedy is ending so swiftly and with such ease. Blessed be.